Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be testing out a couple of airbrushes. Now, as you may have seen in a recent delivery video, I got a couple of airbrushes here from Gaahleri. Again, I think that that's the correct pronunciation for the company name here, but they sent me two different type airbrushes. They make a series of different ones, and so the ones that they sent me are the advanced model and the Ace model. And so in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at both of these airbrushes. I'll do sort of like an unboxing. We'll take a look at the packaging, the products themselves. I'll test them out, and then I'll share some of my thoughts with you guys. My expectation is that they should be pretty good. When it comes to airbrushes, they're kind of like nippers in that so long as they do what you need them to do, you kind of can't really go wrong with airbrushes. I mean, there are certain things that you may have a preference for as far as the type of airbrush, whether it being a siphon feed versus a gravity feed or a dual action versus single action. There's different uses for these different things, but as far as what they've sent me and what I'm going to be testing out here, these are kind of like the most basic, commonly used airbrushes by people painting science fiction model kits like Gundam, other different mecha models, even resin models and stuff like that. So I'm not necessarily expecting anything to be too groundbreaking with these, but I will definitely let you know my thoughts on these and what are some kind of pros and cons, if any. I'll let you know. So let's go ahead and get into it here for today's video. Okay, so let's take a look at the first one here. As you can see, the packaging is pretty simple here on the outside. On the back side here, you can see this is the Ace model amongst the classic, advanced, premium, Ace, and Supreme different models that they're making, at least for the time being. And as you can see here, it is a gravity feed dual action airbrush. We have a little bit more information down here, which is just letting us know that not only is it dual action, but we do also have two different size needles included, a 0.5 millimeter or a 0.38, which is usually the standard. 0.5 would be for painting a larger area if you need that. One notable feature here, as it shows, is a removable material pot. So that means that the actual pot where you're putting the paint into, I guess, is going to be removable. That's certainly unique. That's not always the case with these type of airbrushes. Sometimes it's, one single piece. Also has drop-in self-centering nozzle, which reduces the possibility of nozzle clogged. I think that's kind of pretty standard as far as what I understand they're trying to say with that. Also, extremely polished pot, easy to clean. That's also, I think, probably pretty standard. On the bottom of the box here, we also have kind of a scale as far as what is recommended for this particular brush. So between extreme detail, fine detail, medium, wide, extra wide. So yeah, this one is kind of fine to medium detail, which again is why this is generally the type of airbrush which is used for most model kit painting. Let's go ahead and open it up here, slide that off. The inner box here is very nice, black with that metallic silver there for the printing on it. On the inside of the cover here, this is kind of nice, just a sticker here, but it has the breakdown of all the parts. So this is just not only just kind of some cool artwork like the anatomy of an airbrush, right? But it also can be helpful if you need to disassemble it, which it is recommended from time to time to disassemble and clean everything in your airbrush. So this can be just kind of helpful guide to make sure that you can take everything apart and put everything back together properly. Inside here we got kind of like a test sample card, which is basically just sort of like if you have any problems to contact them and they'll help you with that. We have a quick start guide, which again is sort of like just some beginner's tips on how to use the airbrush. So if it is your first airbrush or if you're kind of new to it, you might find this helpful. So it's kind of nice to be included. I don't think that that's always necessarily included with different brands. So I mean, obviously it's kind of information that you can find all over the internet in various different forms, video and text and everything else. But it's kind of nice to just have that included with here, because it does give you some steps even for the deep cleaning, like I was mentioning, adding lubricant and everything else. So that's nice to have that included with the airbrush, and just you can easily refer back to that, right? So all right, in here, a couple of things to note right off the bat is that it does include lubricant, which is nice. That's also not always the case. There is our alternate needle, and I assume the other needle is here in there already. We've also got some spare O-rings in here, which is also nice because those do eventually kind of break down and wear out, and so you need to replace those, so it's nice to have those. This looks to be like probably a spare cap piece there for at the end of the airbrush. Let's go ahead and pop this out. Here on the side, a very nice chrome finish here on it, has a good weight to it. We remove this here out the back. Just kind of want to disassemble the back end of this just so we can see about changing out the needle. So the needle tip here, it's going to be kind of hard for you guys to see, but looks like it's already a little bit kind of a little bit of abrasion there on the end of the needle, which I think is just the case that the needle is pressed in quite firmly, which is fine for when you're using it, but I think probably for like shipping and storage for packaging purposes, probably the needle shouldn't be pressed in quite so firmly at the factory, would be my feedback on that for the company, and it should be, you know, somewhat loose just so you don't get that abrasion just from the packaging of it. Anyway, let's carefully pop that back into there, just kind of reassemble everything here. Fairly straightforward. I mean, if this is not your first airbrush, this should all be pretty comfortable for you. On the note of the assembly though, just for you guys' reference, you can see we've got a rubber O-ring there on that part, and then also at the very back end here we've got another O-ring there, so it should seal up nice and tightly here, just which is nice to make sure that you don't get paint inevitably when you spill paint or drop paint here and there on it, that it doesn't get into your threading of the screw system there. Now, this is not necessarily going to be like an airbrush tutorial. I will do that. It has been something I've been planning on doing for a long time, but just for like a quick reference for you guys, if you're unfamiliar, what this part right here is doing, that screw is just holding the needle in place so that the needle is where you want it to be. Basically, this is connected to this mechanism which pulls the needle back, as you can see there. And what this part here at the back is going to be just like a stopper, which will allow you to adjust just how far you want to be able to pull the needle back. So if I screw that all the way in, you can see I can't pull the needle back at all, which means that no air or paint will spray out the end of that. So basically just stops that entirely. If I turn that back a little bit, give me a little bit of gap right here, that's how much I can pull the needle back to the back. So it's a good way of being able to control, you know, to make sure if you really only want to spray a little bit, like very fine lines, then you leave that pretty tight in close there, so you're only even going to be able to pull a little bit back on that. Pressing down on the button is what is going to give you airflow, so the air coming up through the hose here is going to be allowed in by that. The only way you control that basically is by how far you press down, and as you can see there's only a small range, so if you just press down just a little bit, you're only going to get a little bit of air. Press it down all the way and you're going to get full airflow there. Now, just for other components inside here is our other needle. I'm guessing that's our 0.5 needle right there. I won't be using that for the time being, but I will want to test that out. And here is our cup, which we're going to screw in here. And like I said, I don't think that I've ever used an airbrush that has a removable cup, so that's kind of nice. It has a cap here on the top, which I typically don't use, but if you are having this, you know, kind of full with paint, you just want to make sure that you're not going to spill the paint as you're airbrushing around. Sometimes the paint can splash out of there, so if it's particularly full, it can sometimes helpful to throw that cap on there just to make sure that you don't spill. But to their point of it being a highly polished cup in there, I would say that, yeah, looks to be, and it also looks to be quite large. I was looking to see where it says what the capacity is, and it looks like the paint pot itself is 1/3 ounce, so you can convert that to milliliters. I'll try to do that there on the screen for you guys, because that's how I would prefer it. But anyway, for your guys' reference, that seems like it's a little bit larger than normal, I believe, but it's pretty good. All right, let's go ahead and move on here for now, where I'm gonna go from sounding like I sort of know what I'm talking about to maybe less so, because this is the advanced model, and as you can see, a different handle type on this and trigger type. So rather than a button on the top that you use, it's got a trigger here on the front. Now, I've never used this type of airbrush before. It is like relatively common, but it just hasn't been something that I've used. That said, all the stats and everything for it is going to be pretty similar. It's dual action. We have a 0.38 and a 0.5 millimeter needle included, 1/4 ounce and 1/2 ounce extra large pot for free replacement. So that'll be good. I guess it has a larger pot on it, so that's nice. Drop in self-centering nozzle for easy cleaning. That's again the same. Water, fill, soil, metal color is more suitable. Long time spraying without fatigue. So yeah, it seems like this is gonna basically be like a workhorse airbrush for like priming, top coat, stuff like that, that you don't need to be precise. You're not painting a lot of little parts that you're kind of spraying over like the whole thing. So that could be good for just like larger areas basically. And if you look here on the bottom, on our scale, once again, this is kind of still in the medium range, but a little bit more towards the wide end. I think probably it could even go maybe a little bit more, like that would be my expectation, but let's see. I mean, to my understanding, it really just kind of comes down to like the needle size and the cup size, because I mean, with the 0.5 needle, you're going to get a larger spray area, but the first airbrush that we saw had that as well. It's just that it has a smaller cup, whereas with this one, we can paint for longer without having to refill the paint just because of the larger size cup. So once again, a diagram on the inside of all the components, and the same kind of materials here on the inside, the test sample and instructions, which once again do feature some more instructions about use and maintenance and everything. So I will go ahead and take a look at this later on before I test it. Just for the time being, let's take a look at everything inside here. So once again, we've got included lube, included extra O-rings, included extra cap. This would be our extra needle, our 2 different size cups. So the first one was 1/3 ounce, right? And this one comes with both 1/4 and 1/2 ounce. So that means it comes with a both larger and smaller size. Now I'm assuming that these are compatible. Let's just see here. So for example, like this is the 1/3 versus 1/2, and I mean, they look pretty similar, but let's see if they are compatible. I'm going to assume so. And yep, seems like it. So that is cool. That means like if I did really want to use this big cup, the 1/2 ounce cup on this airbrush, could definitely do that. So good to know. Take a peek inside this big boy cup here. Very nice, as you can see. And the airbrush itself. All right, yeah, very interesting. It should be, I don't know if this is gonna be more comfortable or not, because yeah, it's dual action, but I'm not exactly sure how the dual action works on this type of airbrush. So let me see. So what it looks like is that the trigger has kind of 2 stages. So you pull it back a little bit and you can feel it where it kind of tightens up here. And so that first stage is your air. So once that's pulled back all the way, you're getting full airflow. And then once you pull it back further, that's when it's actually starting to pull the needle back, where it'll release paint into the mix. So you're kind of gonna always be spraying at full air, basically, I guess is what that is. So again, if you wanna do like really fine work, this is not the airbrush for that, it would seem. So depending on just how fine we're talking about for like model kits and things like that, I don't think so. Anyway, just for the product itself, you can see we have this hard plastic handle on here, and then the actual body of the airbrush itself is once again just going to be in that nice heavy chrome finish metal there. At the back side, we don't have the window through here for adjusting the tightness of the chuck on the needle, but this just unscrews. Interesting, and that just brings out the whole needle like that. So then we're gonna have, if you wanted to remove the needle, you have to remove this part here. Actually, so I kind of did that wrong. There's what I was looking for, but I guess that helps you guys to just kind of see the inner workings. Like I said, I've never used this type of airbrush before, so it's kind of interesting. Certainly an aspect of the brush which we'll want to remove when it's time to do a good deep cleaning, but for the time being, we don't need to worry too much about that. Though in trying to remove the needle out the back here for the first time, it was once again really tight. So yeah, my feedback once again would just be that for, if possible, for the actual production of these, like where they're being produced there at the factory, that the needle not be forced in all the way for it to be packaged like that. Just having it in like almost to the end, I think would just be better, just to preserve the needle, because it's a very fragile and sensitive part of the airbrush itself. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the big boy pot on here for our testing purposes, and we'll get to that here in just a moment. Overall though, I think it's going to be pretty interesting to try this out, so that should be quite helpful, especially for like larger projects too. Like if we're painting like a mega size kit or something, I think like this could definitely be something that would be helpful to not have to change, put more paint in, more paint. Something like that has been my experience on painting a couple of mega size kits in the past. It just takes a lot of paint refilling, and so anything where you can just have more paint in there all at once and have to refill less often will definitely be helpful. Right, so what are we going to paint? This is also going to be a follow-up video to the Project V hobby video that I did earlier, basically where I showed you guys some of the Project V hobby 3D printed resin sets, which is mostly weapons and things like this. This is one of the conversion sets. This is the Jim Cannon 1/44 scale resin conversion here, which as you can see, I already have it all built and put together. Everything's all cleaned up, everything on this. There was a couple of options for the cannon barrel on it. I went with this option, which is the Lido Wolf custom version, so that's the color scheme that I'm going to be using for this as well. There was a couple of little holes that I had to fill in, but otherwise just some basic cleanup, and everything on this it was pretty easy to assemble as far as the resin parts go, and everything fit pretty well with the base kit, so it's pretty easy. I did also go ahead and remove the seam lines on the base kit, These parts here on the side of the leg, you can see they're not like perfectly fit together. I tried my best to kind of warm the parts in some warm water and try to bend them a little bit to get them to fit a little bit more perfectly. It's better, but they were still like kind of a little bit curved and not fitting as flushly as I maybe would have liked. But that's going to be fine. I'm not too worried about it, just for the purposes of just making a 1/44 scale gym cannon here. I think it's just going to be a fun kind of little test kit here where we can test the airbrushes. At the same time, we can test out this conversion kit here from Project V Hobbies. So that's what I'm going to be working on, and then I'll give you some more feedback on the airbrushes once the airbrushing portion is done. But again, if you guys want to check out some of the Project V Hobby resin conversion sets and weapon sets and stuff, you can check them out on USA Gundam Store. We've got some, but again, it's going to be kind of limited stock and then like limited products for now because they're kind of new for us, but we will be getting some more. So if you go and check and there's nothing there or everything's sold out, just come and check back again later. Anyway, all right, let me go ahead and get to work. Okay, so here is the final product, and we'll take a nice look around this. I just want to show it to you guys up close. And just real quick on the note of the kit itself, or more precisely my build here, you can see like there's going to be a couple spots where I should have sanded the 3D printed resin parts maybe a little bit more. You can still see like a little bit. Most of the 3D printed parts didn't have much of that texture to it, like that 3D printed texture, but there's a couple spots here and there where I probably should have sanded that a bit more. There's a lot of spots here and there around on this kit, on my build here, that are not perfect. There's a number of imperfections around here and there. Definitely not an example of like the greatest work that I've ever done, but it's the first kit that I've airbrushed in quite a while since moving to the US, basically, and so it was good to get back on that horse. And I was also happy to try out the Project V Hobby resin conversion here for the kit. So I had a lot of fun just doing this project, kind of quick and simple, fairly simple little project, fairly quick as well. It definitely took longer than maybe I expected, but ultimately I didn't do anything like too crazy or too fancy with it. I did go with the Jaburo Defense color scheme here for this, as you can see, which is a little bit different from just the standard gym cannon. This was just a fun opportunity for me to try out a new airbrush, to try out a new resin conversion set, and just do a fun, quick, simple little project, which I highly recommend you guys to do, you know, in between other larger projects. You know, just do something small, quick, simple, easy, fun like this. It was a lot of fun. And so just to wrap up then and bring the conversation back to the topic of the airbrushes, I found them really good. They're very much, as far as I can tell, just from using them here for a few days working on this kit, very much on par with other airbrushes that I've used before. So I would say they're definitely a worthwhile option for you guys to check out if you're in the market for either your first time airbrush or a new airbrush or a secondary airbrush. The trigger type brush was definitely interesting to try out, as my first time ever using one of those. It's quite comfortable to use as well. If you guys have ever used just like a typical airbrush that has the trigger on the top that you have to use your finger on, if you're doing a fairly long paint session, it can be a little bit uncomfortable just because it's kind of an awkward position to hold your hand in for a long time. If I have a kit, for example, which like has a lot of parts that need to be primed or something like that, if I'm going to be just doing like a ton of surfacer painting or something like that on a bunch of parts, I'll definitely be using that trigger style airbrush just because it is much more comfortable to hold for an extended period of time. So definitely worth checking out, I think, just at the very least for that reason alone. But the actual construction quality of the airbrushes seems to be very good. The additional ability to be able to swap out the cup on the top for either larger or smaller cup size is really nice as well. That also just adds some nice functionality to the brush, which you don't get with a lot of airbrushes. A lot of airbrushes, the cup is just a fixed part of the brush, and so you can't actually take that apart and swap that out. It makes it easier to clean as well, I would feel like. Just the ability to further disassemble the brush just means it's more that you can break down to be able to get it really nice and clean. So overall, good experience so far with them. I'm gonna keep using them, and I'll definitely let you guys know, if I have any other kind of further observations on future projects, the positive or negative. I'll let you guys know if I come across anything that I either really like or have any trouble with. But that's gonna be it for today, guys. Thanks so much for checking out the video. Hopefully you found it helpful and informative. There will be a link down in the video description if you guys want to check out the airbrushes in any more detail, and if you want to check out some of the Project V hobby resin parts and conversion sets, I'll have a link to USA Gundam store down in the video description where you guys can pick up some of those. I will also include a link to my previous video, earlier video, going over some of the Project V hobbies, basically unboxing some of that stuff, just so you guys can see a bit more about that if this is your first time kind of hearing about that stuff. But like I said, that's going to be it for today. Thank you again so much for all of your support, liking the video, commenting, and subscribing. I really appreciate it, you guys. Until next time, hope y'all have a great day. I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.